agreed.
And I was one
and
that-
Not everybody agreed.
Yeah, because I mean, I actually tried.
Right,
At least fix it.
so, yeah,
I'm just gonna.
I mean, I think it's a good idea in theory,
Yeah.
but for me personally, it's just not that great of a thing.
I've also, I've done a little deeper into this issue
Wow.
from the other
That's why
night.
I would want to see.
And the reason-
Yes, do we need power?
Supposed to share.
So they said that we just wait to see, you know, as long as nothing's rose, then we'll just carry on, trying to communicate and kind
Robin
of.
said she's on the way.
What, that, I'm sorry.
Robin's on her way.
She's right here. Just for a second.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's the legislator.
Oh,
Yeah.
join our.
Yeah, give me, after this, I gotta run some.
Zero.
And then a bunch of people.
So funny. For short-term rentals because they have. these
Hey,
meetings.
hey, good.
Discussion, natural discussion.
Hosea.
Yeah, I don't either.
No, good, how are you?
You know, with you guys, what could be better?
The
only I'm not gonna do that. I wanted to talk to him.
You know, and
Yeah.
so.
It was overruled by a very important stakeholder.
Did you make a decision about the planning and development committee?
And so,
Yes,
I mean,
while,
web business.
Yeah, I would do it, but
I
I
haven't.
don't know if I want to do it. Yay.
I'm also told I'm fully willing to step in
but I-
if any logistics issues happen, so. Figured you were out.
Some stuff.
We're overloading this plan.
Yeah.
Any favor? Thanks.
Oh, you could hear me squeaking?
No.
Oh.
We have this compulsion, if you don't mind, to squeeze the brake levers.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, tighten your brake duster, like a quarter turn clockwise.
Yeah.
Really good.
I've tightened them, it's been a while since I've tightened them, but I do try to keep them
No, I don't.
tight from time to time.
But-
Yeah.
Well, nobody ever does.
Yeah. Well, the first time I had these kind of brakes, I went into a bike shop. I'm like, I think I need new brakes. And they're like, you just need to tighten them.
Oh, that's really good. You're taking the hub like that.
No, there's like kind of an key thing that right where the on the disc itself, there's a brake that the caliper, whatever you call it, that squeezes.
Okay.
So you're slowing us down.
Years ago. The BZA,
Yeah.
I'd say once I think it was the city bikes in New York, when they did the version two. I've got my son's taste the disc brakes on bike and I was like, there's that.
Yeah. Well,
Just the confidence.
You guys don't want to change.
yeah.
I feel like it's like a must have.
Not laughing.
No, I thought we were doing
Yeah.
just the presentation.
Yeah, I got my kid one of those Guardian bikes in their advertising on social media.
It's the other one I see a lot.
Yeah, no, you're right, there wasn't.
It's got the stroke on but it controls both brakes, but it like starts the rear brake and then the brakes. They don't do that. Yeah, exactly.
It's like.
Freestyle bikes, it's just brakes now. Like, probably not.
Yeah.
That's difficult.
Really do some cool tricks.
Yeah, I always, I would do it myself, like when I was a kid. I had the old, I have the reverse.
I had that.
Different
kind of setup
for the building.
Pass it with my, so. I love that.
No, we're at,
It's like now that I'm getting out.
Right across the street
I'm
from
like,
Brett.
Yeah.
Wait, is that the green? It's a green route.
Get a mine.
Now I need to.
So nice.
He is. Should we wait for Ben?
Maybe.
We'll give him a few more minutes. Bigger space.
Seems like all the guys who do.
It,
Over a tiny place.
probably our total square footage is actually probably lower.
Okay.
We've got a couple offices.
You're a really beautiful building that's
Yeah.
right over there.
There's a bunch, yeah, and we're in one of those. We don't take up the whole.
Yeah, there's that one that's it's next to First Bank, I think.
Enjoying that.
He's got the little back thing. I think he does.
It's really quick yo-yo.
Tiger insurance. But then the house is so it's the cream and the bigger house, it's got the. Green.
This is what it's supposed to be.
I know, yeah, I know what you're talking
It is funny though, living.
We're living something like this.
Okay.
It's like summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're immediately across the street from First Pres.
Gotcha.
Where that street that runs south of it, dead ends right into our house.
Such a great area. There's a really talented, husband and wife that's architects that they don't do it for one.
Yeah,
They
so
live right for,
they want us all to.
right behind the White House. I've been in this area. I'm not sure if you've already had it. Used to, they used to.
Canada Air too. I'm like,
Quite a bit.
I mean, for.
Oh.
They've done,
CRJ 900.
that's not one of the CRJ
Yeah.
900. I
and
mean, granted, it wasn't an equipment failure.
Right, yeah. it's just-
Palo Alto,
Planes
I think I saw
really
that.
bunch of, residential.
No, you think. Too low.
Local people, they,
I'm the same type plane.
Okay.
The problem with the plan is
Right.
Almost just so, right? Even
Yeah.
like, they staff shows up, they're still shooting it like.
I did draft rooms in I didn't give the show and like two of the times they were literally not even.
I've done it too. They're like, go through the X-ray machine.
Guys,
I'm like,
waiting
really?
around.
Like, go through the X-ray. I'm like, all right.
They're very thorough. They're
They
very
are,
thorough.
it's like, I think they get bored, so. I had some. It is my mistake, because I'm farmer's market. The way to look at it, you need to come and see them.
So.
And then I was like, I'm gonna be. We're trying to into the airport and they're like.
no. I would, at first I was like, I thought it might be, but I didn't see it was from the original. I'll just.
Steam's exploding. Power boat. It's like like a panic.
Don't use OxyClean.
There you go. I think that's. Vibration.
Yeah.
Blair Kelly started.
It's not just about.
No, it's just.
This one, some of my colleagues are doing as a group of us are going somewhere training, some are.
Yeah.
What?
You know, the party really far. Yeah, when you book it far.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been, went to the wrong place.
Yeah. I've been there.
Got lots of messages in lots of places.
I think I'm reading the second on the agenda.
Yeah.
I'm sure helpful.
But I'm sure you can.
It's kind of long, but it's interesting.
You know, it's longer than it is. Yeah, so you can actually get a lot done if there's stuff.
Tell you.
There's like no self. They're like, there's
Yeah.
no, like, you're just out of town and there's nothing.
Cause I'm not taking January.
Yeah, you get some like.
So-
It's pretty kind of.
Absolutely. They should never get as long as hosts, yeah.
Something on the train. You can do that if it's moving.
It's sort of
Airplanes are doing,
trying
I
to
think they're
find-
basically Starlink or another similar stuff.
He's not responding and I sent a message with our.
And now they're saying they're moving the data centers to space.
I mean, I think it's one of those things you say.
That solar array, 1,000 times the size.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you? Data center in space. Which, but I'm like thinking
I
about
don't
like.
know, something I did once and it just.
It's radius, like.
So-
Yeah.
I mean,
Check it out.
We got a cold.
That's not, it is.
Technically, sometimes,
Well,
right?
not the end.
I just don't know if they can create like something like do this
There were-
geosynchronous thing and they do that with.
That's interesting. That came in, I was just gonna review what was in. Yeah.
So they would just, I can get a space elevator.
I can just get a wire coming in.
I was
already
understanding it. Usually talk to physicists.
Yeah.
That's the easy part. Later
Yeah.
down back. You can do that. Making space elevators. is cheap.
This part of it.
Spike? Thank you.
Yeah. Been neighbor years ago. Architectural
Oh, yeah.
competition things. And I really do that.
There was a really good science fiction series by like a literature professor. And it got a bunch of space. Yeah.
I think foundation that I have not.
I think
they-
we did that.
Yeah. So.
The truth is, oh, it's, you know, it's.
Yep, here's my spam.
They said.
It's.
I done some from that to see if we get around to it.
But it is interesting, I almost. feel
You
like
might get usurped.
You
there,
don't
so-
know the source material. I think it's interesting, sci-fi, it's just not. It's not like. Movies that have. Really close.
Yeah.
Source material, this is like. I think
Pretty
we
good.
got artistic license.
It started at 5:30.
I
think he thought it started at 5:30.
I think I get this, but the latest one they did. They said,
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen that.
That's fun.
Oh my God.
It's a very, very.
Or I'll just.
One.
And,
Because he had.
Yeah, they can turn like a whole world into any different individual.
Yeah. It's like very charming. Yeah. Sort of talk to the relationship to it. So.
Guessing.
Not so nice. Okay. For a long time. So it's a little bit surprising. If he decided to be a knight as a kid. This is worth a bunch.
They get it.
Boys.
Yeah.
I wish.
Say he didn't.
I have, yeah.
So you actually know that.
Yeah, see,
I read that. I read the book.
I did
really
too.
enjoyed
I
it.
remember reading the book being like, oh man, someone's gonna be.
Well, I feel like when they did The Martian.
We're okay to flip out.
Like, okay, so now he's figured out.
But it's up to you guys.
Yeah, no, he's like, good movie.
All right,
See it.
all
So you get.
right, guys, we're gonna get started. We're just gonna flip the agenda around. So welcome to tonight's planning commission work session. We have two items on our agenda. We have an update in the city's transportation planning and a report on the city's homestay ordinance. Unless Ben shows up in the next 30 seconds, it looks like we're gonna do the homestay ordinance first. No votes are gonna be taken tonight. Any votes in the homestay ordinance are at least a month or a few months out. Council hasn't even seen this presentation yet. We don't usually take public comments at our work sessions, but we will tonight for the homestay ordinance. So what we're gonna do is first, we're gonna hear from staff about it. And then we're gonna have the planning commission ask questions, and after that, the public can provide comments. You can also always email us. You can get us at planningcommission@charlottesville.gov, or if you go to the planning commission's page on the city's website, there's a link there to provide feedback. Yep, that's it.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Missy Creasy, and I'll be guiding you through the materials that have been compiled related to this project. This would be the homestays and short-term rental. I'm going to attempt to complete the presentation with time for questions following, but I do encourage commissioners, if there's questions for clarity, to do let me know as needed there. Next slide. All right, so our agenda will be as follows. We're gonna have an introduction. We'll go into the study process, research and data, potential options for changes to the code, some of the community and stakeholder engagement. We'll provide some background on that, as well as implementation and next steps. I also want everyone to note that there is a website that has a lot of information about the details of this project. This is very much an overview, but there's a lot of different information there. So, next slide, Patrick. All right, so we're gonna begin with the definition of homestay, and this is specifically a residential property that's rented less than 30 days. And the properties that we've been studying in this opportunity have been the residential properties in the residential areas, which is RA, B, and C. And most of the light yellow that you can see in this map, those are the areas that were most of focus. Property owners who reside at the residence for at least 185 days of the calendar year have the ability to apply for a homestay permit. Once it was determined, it was time to review the current ordinances. It was a decade old. It's one of the early ordinances that were formed for short-term rentals around the country. In fact, we have many communities all over that use our ordinance as they are forming their own ordinance. So there are a lot of times where you'll see something that looks pretty familiar out there. The number of homestays has increased pretty significantly. And it was a good opportunity to look at the regulations and context of current comprehensive plan goals. In fact, there is a specific goal to look at this, and that was part of the reason why this became a project. Next slide. All right, so I'm gonna go through kind of the high points of the current regulations. This is what is on the books today. This includes a proof of residency, including some sort of photo ID. Homestay permits valid for a year with $100 fee. The code states the operator is required to have a number of safety measures, including smoke and carbon monoxide detectors and fire extinguishers. The code requires the permit holder allow staff access to the premises once a year if notified in advance. So that's already included in the code. Again, they must reside within the unit at least 185 days of the year, and up to 6 adults and any number of children may lease a homestay. Yes.
The photo ID requirement, is that new? Are we adding that, or does that exist now?
It's a proof of residency. The code gives a couple of examples. We have found that some of the examples that are in there do not provide proof of residency. So our person who works through these permits works back and forth with applicants to make sure that they have something that shows that the individual is a resident.
But it needs to be a photo ID. Yeah, I mean, for example, my photo ID, my driver's license has a different address from the one I live at. And there are probably lots of folks like that.
Well, I know that they work with individuals, so it's definitely not a one size fits all. So, all right.
I have a question on current regs too. On a previous slide, it says there's a maximum of 30 days per year. It's not repeated on this slide, and I've been, when I was preparing for this, unable to find that reference. Do you know where that 30-day maximum is referenced?
Not off the top of my head, but I believe it has something to do with the levels of residency, because if it's over 30 days, it's a long-term situation. So it's a rental
You're above.
Oh, 30 days at a time. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, agreed.
All right, so the study process. All right, next slide. So this is a diagram timeline that we have that shows the progress of this project. So we started in spring of 2025 with scoping of the project and then information gathering timeframe, followed by a community survey and then procurement of the Granicus system, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we move forward. So drafting of the recommendations based on findings began following an additional occurred and then following in the winter of 25, we met with the community and had other outreach opportunities. So we're now in the process where we're meeting with you all as the commission in the phase 5, and then we are scheduled in May to provide a presentation to City Council. Next slide. All right, so the Granicus system, what is this system? So this is a software that's tailored to the city, so it shows the city. And provides a number of data points for us as we are looking at short-term rentals. One is it locates them, and it locates them by finding listings online. So it helps assist us with proactive enforcement and licensing. Also, the Commissioner of Revenue's Office uses this. If it's showing up that a location has been listed, they also link in and make sure that that individual is following the rules that they need in that realm. And it also has a system of generating and sending out letters that help us through the enforcement process. What we've gained from the system so far was the identification of 529 short-term rentals. That's what it's showing. Again, we're mining through that to see exactly what that is. We kind of think the number's a bit lower, but we're having to do a 1-by-1 to try and figure that out.
Is that 500 more than we previously knew about, or just 500?
Total.
Okay.
Total that are showing up. It tracks rentals on every platform. So any sort of homestay, short-term rental type platform that's on the web. They mine that data into this system. And it catalogs the rental history. And so it's actually taking the information, and if it's been rented in the past, it kind of gives us a flow of what that's looked like. So it's become we're in the beginning stages of using this, but it's really made a big difference in us being able to figure out the research phase of concerns that come in. So prior to the system, we had a staff member that would go from each of the different servers, each of the different websites, from website to website, plug in the address, try and gather the information. If there was a listing, we'd have to screenshot everything because the data changes. And this system has allowed for, we click on the address on that map and it links us to the listings for that address. So it's been a huge time saver in trying to increase our enforcement issues. All right, next slide. All right, so this is some data that came out of the system. Again, it talks a little bit about, it shows us in most cases an entire house is rented. That's a data point. And it also shows us information on the number of bedrooms that are listed through the system and how, percentage throughout the community. So good, another set of good information. Next slide. So we've got some data from the Commissioner of Revenue's Office concerning transient lodging tax. So short-term rental is 17%. Again, 17% is anybody who's using an online hosting site. So this is a combination of anybody who's in the commercial and mixed use areas or the residential area. So it's not just the residential area that we're talking about. That's wholly what's coming from that. And it does note that we still have a very robust market for hotels and motels as well.
These numbers are a little confusing to me. These are the $12,000. Is that per homestay or is it per?
No, that's total.
That's a total revenue.
That's
we're
the
getting from
cost
homestays?
for business license.
The cost for the business license.
Yeah. Oh, wait a second. No, that's the 18.
Okay, what is it?
Oh, you're here. Great. I didn't know Todd was here. Let's let Todd answer that. Todd Divers, our Commissioner of Revenue.
Yeah, the top line's business tangible personal property, so that's business equipment.
Tangible.
In a hotel, that's gonna be like your beds, your fixtures, your things like that. Airbnbs, they don't really have very much. They might report a bed or a TV that's in a bedroom or something, so there's not much money there. There's no meals tax from homestays. A lot of hotels pay meals tax. Transient occupancy tax, that's kind of the big one. You see the hotels and motels pay 7.6 million. I think this was from last year. The homestays are doing about 1.5.
Is that the 9% you referenced earlier? Yeah, Two slides earlier, you represented.
The 83%,
No, 9%.
9%.
No,
No,
occupancy
the
tax.
9% is the.
No, that's
the-
great.
The rate of the tax,
Right, so, yeah, so yes, okay.
the percentage of, yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
I've got a quick question. Do we have a sense of like the scale between hotels and the short-term rentals? Like how many rooms, hotel rooms are there in the city versus how many rooms there are in short-term rentals?
I don't. Chris Engel could give it to you.
We have that data, but we can get it to you.
Okay.
We just don't have it at our fingertips right now.
That would be more, I think, useful, like putting that the
Thanks.
hotels generate more revenue, but I would guess there's probably a lot more rooms, hotel rooms.
Kind of a similar question, but do we know what fraction of homestays are actually compliant and paying taxes as of 2025?
With regard to the transient occupancy tax, I can tell you that that is now almost entirely paid by the online platforms. The Airbnb, VRBO, they're collecting the money and they're sending it to us. Virtually none of the hosts have to do that anymore. There's been some changes in Richmond.
Okay, so the Granicus compliance end is about making sure other rules are followed, not tax collection.
Primarily, I mean, we're still getting business license from them. We're still getting tangibles from them.
But looking at this chart,
It's not much.
the bulk of the money is from the platforms, not through Granicus. Okay.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate that. Next slide. Well, I think. Step back for me. Hold on. Okay, yes, all right. Next slide is wonderful. Thanks, Patrick. Sorry. All right, so there are a number in addition to tax revenue that comes in, there are a number of industries that benefit from short-term rentals. And that includes a lot of our tourist dollars that come into the community, wedding, breweries, vineyards, those are kind of big things we have around here, restaurants and businesses. And then the auxiliary other areas where we have cleaning and repair companies. Again, there's business that's involved with that as well. All right, Patrick, next slide. All right, so we started out by doing comparative research from other communities. So online we have charts that show the communities and the details, but this is just the highlights of that. And we found that most localities require proof of residency. And the fee for a homestay permit it definitely varies quite a bit. We're not even in the middle, we're just kind of on the side there a bit. Inspections, many do require safety inspections. Guest limits, it's very common for there to be a limit per bedroom or and or a number per property. So that is a common thing. Proof of insurance is often required. Proof of residency requirements, all the localities that we were able to find had some sort of proof of residency requirement. And then new next slide, Patrick, sorry. This continues over because there's quite a bit. New for Virginia is this human trafficking certification that operators in Virginia are going to have to be compliant with. Again, this is something from the state. I know that as we've talked to providers, they're not sure exactly what that is, and we haven't gotten a straight answer either. We know it's going to be a requirement, but until there's clarity, our understanding is it'll be an online training that would be offered to cover that. And I'm sure some of our folks may have some more feedback when we get to that point. All right, next slide. All right, so the General Assembly passed a new law. Requires localities to allow tenants to be able to operate short-term rentals with the permission of the landlord. That is a change. And the requirement would have to be put in place if we made a change to the short-term rental code. So that is something that came out as part of our study. That has the potential to open up the use of homestays to more operators within the community. And increase the numbers as well as potential increase to neighborhoods. So there's a lot of unknowns with what that might result in. All right, next slide.
Just because this confused me, and I expect no one else is confused, but just to be sure everyone understands, if we don't revise the ordinance, bullet number 1 doesn't come into play. Bullet number 1 only comes into play if we go in and change the ordinance.
Correct. Yes, we've gotten that interpretation, legal interpretation as well. All right, so next slide. So proposed options. All right, so the next slide, we have a chart that was put together that provides information concerning the current regulations besides some of the proposed that had been under consideration. Many of these were items that we had taken to the public when we went to the open house. And so this is a good visual, and I know folks have had this, it's been online for the last week. Good opportunity to kind of see what is currently on the books required, and then what was a potential proposal, given the feedback that we've had so far. All right, next slide.
We're cutting, I mean, there's a proposal to cut the days that can be rented in half. So we're going from 180 to 90. Am I reading that right?
That was one of the proposals that came.
You know what was driving that?
So
Went away though.
to my question earlier, current regulations are you can rent it out as many days as you want.
To
No.
180.
Well, you could if you are there.
If you're there,
If
you
you're
have to
there.
be there for 185
Yeah.
days. But even if you're there, you can still rent out a room.
Yeah.
And the other 180 days, you could rent out your entire place.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
And so then to further clarify, these proposals are community proposals or staff proposals?
Mostly staff from the research,
Okay,
and those came forward to the community meeting. Again, we wanted, as this is all evolved, we wanted to kind of give the record of the steps that have come along the way.
sure.
Because I didn't get that.
Yeah, it's confusing. I'm just trying to reconcile these proposals with a future slide that says the staff is
Yes,
recommending
and we
no
will
change.
get there.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand where these proposals lie within a no change recommendation.
We thought about doing a spoiler alert slide at the beginning. That basically said, we're gonna go walk you through like all of the recommendations that we considered, but ultimately have decided not to make any recommendations for changes.
So what was the thinking, what was staff's thinking when you decided that cutting this in half might be the way to go?
And I just wanted to try to clarify that as well, that question. So the regulation today is that you have to live there 185 days, so more than half of the year. The proposal that we had been considering is that you can rent the unit no more than 90 days. So we weren't proposing to cut the requirement in half. It was just saying, right?
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it was limited.
Right, so the proposal
Yeah,
that
but
we
the
had been
proposal, it's okay, hold
considering was
on.
that you have to, right, the proposal we had been considering was that you can actually rent out your unit no more than 90 days. But you were still going to be required to have to live there at least half a year.
Yeah,
You were gonna have to be able to demonstrate that you were a permanent resident. But on top of that, we had been considering an additional provision that you could only rent it out 90 days out of the year. Which kind of translates into,
Maybe I'm confused, but.
So part of the conversation,
365 days.
If you live there,
Yes.
Yeah.
right?
so part of the conversation is again, this is accessory in a lot of ways. This is not supposed to be the main use of this dwelling. The main use is it's where the person lives. And so with the estimate of 90 days, we talked about the potential to rent every weekend, which is a lot of people do the weekends or do special events in the community. And so kind of narrowing down that, that's where that proposal came. Again, it was not very popular at the community meeting at all. But it was something to continue to enforce that this is one piece of a puzzle and that people live in these houses.
One question there, one clarification. I'm just trying to understand the why, because
We'll have time for public. in a minute.
Perfect, thank you.
I may have made a question. Look, why are we talking about things that you aren't recommending that anybody do?
We're sorry, I'm sorry this is so confusing. We're providing kind of the process of this project. And obviously that's led to some confusion. So this was a piece of where we landed or where we progressed through this. We had this set of recommendations, more information came to light, and we changed as we move forward. So I'm really sorry, Mr. Cart, and others this is a little confusing.
It may be less confusing so we will have a chance to ask staff questions when Missy is done with the presentation. So maybe it'd be less confusing if we kept these like little clarifications and then we really get into questions.
No, it's not confusing. We're talking about things that we're not talking about, right? None of this is actually happening.
But it could, I mean, we could advise staff to, maybe we like these proposed changes. When we get to the end of the conversation tonight, we don't get to vote on it tonight, but staff is gonna be looking for some sort of feedback from us at the end of this to say, wait a sec, no, maybe you should go ahead and do some changes, or we say, no, we agree with you, keep it as it is, or we say something else. And let's let staff finish their presentation and then we can get them with some questions and then we can figure out from there where we're going. That makes sense? Yep.
Thanks, guys. We're most of the way there. It'll be okay. All right, next slide, Patrick. All right, so cost benefit of amending the ordinance. So we had a lot of, weighing a lot of different things. And as we move forward, I'll talk a little bit about the highlights that we've received from the community so far. So benefits, more stringent requirements to demonstrate owner occupancy, internal safety inspection requirement. Again, we currently have the ability to do that, but the proposal would provide more of a requirement. The occupancy allowance increased from 6 to 8, allowing for some flexibility, which would work for a lot of places within the community, not all. And then a permit term would reduce staff time approving permits on an annual basis. But some of the costs to consider as part of this is increased staff time on internal inspections. Code changing, we would have to jump into the tenant operation allowance at this point in time. And then there are potential impacts with more guests. All right, next slide. All right, so community outreach. So we had a survey that went from, wait a second. Okay, yes, so these are kind of some of our big outreach opportunities. We conducted a survey online in May and June of last year. And we had 500 respondents to that, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of the areas where information we heard from that. We also had a community meeting right in this room on December 3rd. And then we met with a group of advocacy, STR advocacy group in February. And this is in addition to just ongoing dialogue. We've had a lot of people provide inquiries. We've talked to a lot of people throughout this process. So there's been opportunities to gather feedback, and I'm sure that we will gather more as we continue. So, all right, next slide, Patrick. All right, so the community survey. So there were a couple of highlights I want to point out here. So again, we had 500 people respond. That's pretty hefty response for a survey. Key benefits noted were economic opportunities for the owners, tourism, and visitor options. So they provide more options. And some of the primary concerns that were outlined were housing impacts, neighborhood fabric, and then a variety of nuisance related items, including noise, parking, and traffic issues. There was a grouping that identified no concerns with short-term rentals, and most of those folks identified as resident homeowners. So that's additional information for consideration.
Do you have any idea? It says a subset. Is that 1%, 5%, 10%? Do you have any idea?
I do not, and I do not see your individual who worked with the survey, but that is a question that we can get answered.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we held a community meeting in December of 2025. We had a diverse group of participants, a lot of different neighborhoods, ages, people in different housing situations. It was an opportunity for attendees to review displays, ask questions of staff, and provide comment, as well as we had a formal presentation and a question answer session as part of that. And it was noted in the summary that homestays generate economic benefit, boost tourism, and offer a unique lodging option that helps support local businesses. And some of the concerns that were noted had to do with rising cost of housing due to lack of availability and the permanent loss of resident base. Next slide. All right, so through the community meeting, a group of the short-term rental operators organized and contacted the zoning division with a different model for regulating homestays. So this group provided a number of questions for review and had suggestions as to how the ordinance might be changed. And so highlights of that are noted here on the slide. Staff does want to note that we received comment from other providers in the community who are not part of this group and don't feel that that group represents them. So that's another thing to consider. So next slide.
So what would folks like to see the 185-day rule replaced with? They just would like to see it loosened?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
General loosened, okay.
I'm sure we'll get some feedback, more feedback. And there is there's some information also that's more detailed. This is just some highlights. All right, so next slide. All right, key findings and staff recommendations. So next slide, we have a number of things that we've learned and or confirmed through this process. Community engagement indicates support for short-term rentals within the community with increased enforcement efforts. Community occupancy limits of 6 adults, limits larger properties, but provides a number of opportunities for many operators within the community. Strengthening requirements for home occupancy would be challenging to enforce. Key item that came to light in this process was the state code provision. It's an unknown potential impact that, making a change to the code, we would have to put in this allowance for renters to operate homestays with the owner's permission. And because we're just beginning to implement a lot of our new measures with our enforcement tools, we're concerned about introducing that unknown at this point in time. So speaking of those new measures, staff has also determined with the new resources that we have, the new software, and we have dedicated staff to this effort, that we're hopeful for improvement on the concerns that we've been facing as a community. Next slide. All right, so here is where we have landed at this moment in time with recommendation. And that is to maintain our existing code without any amendments at the moment. To strengthen monitoring of homestay compliance, permitting requirements, and education about homestay requirements. In addition, to continue to monitor the impacts of the state code provision allowance as that is implemented in other places throughout the state of Virginia. And then for homestays that are located in zoning districts that are not the residential districts, again, we did not look at those specifically as part of this process. To conduct the yearly inspections, those in commercial and mixed use areas actually end up in a different building code kind of situation, and our fire marshal has been researching the best way to handle those anyway. So that kind of is an aside, there's that kind of side project going on. And then continue to study those issues pertaining to those situations for a future work plan priority. And that is the presentation.
All right. So, yeah, I guess we can go just around with questions. We'll start with that, and if it has to become more conversational, we can do that, but, Michael, do you want to start, or? You have anything?
Okay, no.
Okay.
I guess maybe a comment before a question. I think maybe we got hung up on the proposed language on that one slide. So if it was just like a option you considered, I would suggest just not calling it, because it sounds like someone's proposing to do this when it sounds like you considered it but are not proposing to do it. That might help with our
The word
confusion.
option, that
Yeah.
does make some sense. I just got information that the subset category was 20%, so 20% of the 500. In the survey, the community survey, noted.
20% had no issues with the current. Okay.
And I think there's also a question about data on number of listings. So we were able to research that as well. And one statistic we can offer is that in 2025, there were 4,100 hotel rooms in the market, over 1.5 million listing nights available for hotels. Sorry, this is 2024 data. Short-term rentals accounted for 14% of that inventory. So.
Interesting.
Is that pre or post Granicus?
This is a different data source. Yeah.
Is that, sorry, is that pre or post platforms dispersing money to the city directly?
This is data that we get from a source called AirDNA. So I'm not sure how it relates to the question you're asking about Granicus.
I don't know if it's complete, right? If it's from the platforms, they hopefully aren't telling you lies. If it's staff screenshotting listings, then you're gonna miss things.
Yeah, this source is AirDNA, and it does this kind of market research to to develop these sort of statistics. So you can take it with a grain of salt, but that's what AirDNA tells us about the share of the market that's coming from homestays.
Could you say those numbers just one more time? That the number of hotels?
4,100 hotel rooms in the market.
14% for short-term
And
rentals.
1.5 listing nights available for hotels, and short-term rentals accounted for 14% of that inventory in 2024.
Thank you.
So I guess one issue or one question about enforcement, the code is set up so that you can't have a full-time short-term rental, right? Like you can't own a property and Airbnb it full-time. You have to live there for, more than half a year. But I think, we all know that there are full-time Airbnb homes in the city. I mean, I think I live 2 houses down from one. So since the platforms, I guess I have 2 questions. Since the platforms are paying the occupancy taxes directly to the city, does that mean that there are, unregulated short-term rentals who are still paying the occupancy tax to the city?
Yes.
Okay. And can you talk just a little bit about enforcement of the full-time short-term rentals? Like, I don't know, do you have any numbers or just a order of magnitude, kind of how many? Or what do you do when you learn that there is a unregulated short-term rental? Or that isn't following the 185-day residency requirement, you know, like what are the steps? And I'm just curious to get a sense of scale, like how often does this happen?
Well, I must say that that is one of the hardest things to enforce. So the best that we have through the code, actually, as we've gone through this process, we have been meeting with our attorneys as part of this. And so they have been with us along the way. And enforcement of that is going to be a challenge. It will be a challenge all around. In fact, as part of our proposal, we met with the Commonwealth's office as well, trying to work through different enforcement opportunities that would be available. And it's a really tough thing to do. So there is a lot of, you know, we have to rely on the regulations that we have. We get, concerns from people on a regular basis. We investigate them. We do the best we can with violation letters. You know, it's always gonna be a challenge.
But you would, given the new software, I mean, just because the tax is coming in, you would automatically know about it, right?
So our efforts are kind of separate in some ways. Yes, we know that people are paying taxes for something that they may not be doing with all the proper paperwork. Again, the software gives us the opportunity to more quickly find these locations. Before, it would take hours to go from site to site and try and pick the information off of them, whereas now we have it kind of coming in one thing. So there still be violations, we're just able to find them quicker based on the data that's online, because we don't have to go individually to find it. It comes to one place.
What is the violation for, you know, running afoul of the short-term rental code? Like, do you get a fine?
There is a fine opportunity.
Yeah.
It is very limited. Again, this is in the zoning code, and we do have fine opportunities, but they are limited to a zoning violation level. Again, we have attempted to explore other opportunities for trying to continue to enforce this. We've found some of the most effective ways are, you know, peer related.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people want to have the opportunity to do this in the community. And if there are people who are making it difficult, that becomes a challenge. Because again, that is another option. This use could go away for the community. Again, the community doesn't want that. In fact, we've shared, you know, that they're very interested in keeping this use in the community. But that is an option that's on the table if it becomes something that's not working for the community.
Yeah. So it sounds like the violation, the fine amount, whatever it is not that effective.
It's not a huge deterrent.
Yeah. Okay.
But you know, there's, you know, once you get on the radar of your neighborhood,
Yeah.
It gets complicated, because then you're getting letters and you're getting concerns and you're getting calls. And you know, if the rules are there, they're pretty straightforward. It's struggle. The majority of people are doing what they need to be doing. And the ones that we hear about are the very complicated cases. And it's very similar to any kind of property zoning violation that, you know, most people are doing what they're supposed to. And then there's situations where there's just struggle.
Can you remind us what that fine is? Is that $75 a day?
I don't think it's a per day.
Okay.
I think it's $200.
Flat,
Yeah.
$200
Per occurrence, per year?
per violation.
So it's a violation?
There's
It's
a-
every
there's a
96
max,
days
though.
over?
It's a couple thousand is the max.
Okay, that's what I thought. So it's.
Yeah. So we could send letters, and send violations constantly.
Yeah.
That's not the most effective way. Again, it is a method and it's one that we do employ. But it's, you know, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
I guess I'm mostly looking forward to hearing from people who are using this, probably in the room, who have comments. And also a question about ADUs. When you say the number of days that you're living in a unit and you have an attached or detached second unit, which we'll probably have, well, hopefully have more of in the future. How does that work when you have
You can have one on site. So if you
at
have,
one time, or like if you, let's just,
you could move
and
it
you have like
from,
4 little units on your lot or
you
something?
can have one AD or one short-term rental.
Yeah.
Again, this is an accessory to people living in a residential area. This is not meant to be sole source. Again, that's, you know, I know folks have different opinions on that, but this is something that's supposed to be compatible with residential neighborhood living.
And my read of it is that not only can it only be one unit, it has to be the one that is occupied by the operator. So you can't live full-time in one unit and rent out the other one as a homestay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
That's-
people
that's
in my
my- that's
neighborhood
my
do
reading
that,
of
who
it.
have like a separate 1-bedroom unit in their backyard, seem to live in one and rent the other.
What staff's take on that?
Typically in those cases, it's not going to rise to the level of violation that other things. Mainly, you know, the ones that we spend the most time are nuisance related.
So it's technically a violation, but it's not one that we bother with.
Okay, so you can't, I'm just,
You're allowed to have two. You're allowed to have your house and your ADU.
You're allowed to have them as units, but not as a homestay.
Hey, I don't know if you can hear me. This is Reed Broadhead, the zoning administrator.
yep.
Hi, well, first I wanted to mention that, for violations, it's $200 for the first violation, and every 10 days we can send a $500 violation up to 5,000. So it's a max of 5,000. And then to mention about how many Airbnbs you can have on your property, it's one. You can have one Airbnb on your property. It can either be in the house, it could be in the ADU in the backyard, it could be the ADU in the basement, but it's one per property.
Okay. The one at a time on a property.
Yeah, so if there are multiple units, again, on a property, one. Because again, this code, you know, this is something that's supposed to be compatible with neighborhood living. And again, things can always change in the future, but that's kind of where we are now.
I have a little question and a bigger question, try and be brief. Small question, I assume you've already thought about this and rejected it. For enforcement, is it possible to say if you've broken the rules in some obvious way, you don't live in the state, for example, can we deny permission to rent on these platforms at all, or is that not possible to do?
Well, we can't, we wouldn't be able to tell the platform, I mean, we could tell them, but they can do whatever they want. We can revoke permits. And we can not issue permits. And I mean, since this is a yearly permit, every year is an opportunity to reevaluate what's going on site.
So you can deny a permit, but the operator can still ignore you and pay a fine possibly, okay.
That happens with all sorts of things everywhere.
Do staff currently deny or revoke a permit if something comes to their attention for enforcement? Is that, or is it not worth doing?
We go through the checklist of items to get the permit, and if the individual can meet that permit requirement, then we issue the permit.
I'll follow up afterwards. I think there was a BZA ruling where
Yeah.
that was not done. where someone didn't live on the site and BZA determines that you couldn't take the permit away from them? I'll ask afterwards when I have more information. Or is that,
I just remember that.
okay,
Yeah, again, if we're in a situation where we're ready to remove a permit because of violation, we're gonna be working with our attorney's office to make sure that everything is in place to do that. That would not be the first route we would go. Where we very much work with people as much as possible. We want people to take advantage of the opportunities that the community provides. We also want everyone to do that in such a way that allows for, you know, I don't know, it's tough.
okay. Last thing, kind of be quick. I'm trying to understand if there's a problem to be solved here, or if it's just been 10, 11 years and time to revisit the ordinance. It sounds like there's no recommended changes. There's not a huge problem. And this is more of a refresh, and we checked and things are roughly okay. Are there problems that we need to solve in the ordinance, or is this just a review where we said, yep, good enough, keep going as we are?
I think there are always things that can be tinkered with. I think we would be having a very different conversation if we weren't faced with the state legislation that we're working with here. We might get a little bit more into the weeds and make some adjustments. We have a pretty good ordinance for what it is. Again, back, a decade ago, the industry was not quite what it is today. It's a lot more robust now. And it's very lucrative. And, if folks are doing it according to the rules, cool, go forth. But when people don't do things according to the rules, we hear about it from various sources, and we just try to do the best we can to get folks back into the proper compliance.
We'll get to staff or to public questions. Shortly. Yeah.
You wanna go?
No, go ahead, please.
I have several questions. Some of the, first off, related to sort of the zoning text directly, there's some references from the homestay section to the home occupancy section that are contradictory. Mostly related to, well, the contradictory one is that the homestay, you're not allowed an exterior sign, where the home occupancy that's referenced is you're allowed an exterior sign. So maybe it's worth cleaning that up. Then, one that I think could confuse people trying to do a homestay is subsection 4 of the home occupation code states that your customers can't visit earlier than 8 AM or later than 9 PM. It's kind of hard to have a lodging place where people can visit you at night.
No, this is you're not going into anything that we aren't already struggling with. When they put forth the new code, things were in provisional use and things were in home occupation, and in temporary use. And those things kind of got mumbled together. And so we're struggling with some of the changes that have come forward. So yes, we know that those are potential conflicts. Again, we've got to balance all of the activities that are going on. But yes, we surely realize that is not as clear. And usually when we get calls concerning that, our zoning staff is able to provide some clarity.
Sure.
Reed, is
I'm
there?
just bringing it up for zoning text amendment conversations that we're having periodically to include those in there.
Yeah, Reed, isn't that one we talked about is already in the mix?
Yeah, that's the sign issue, and then of course, people use short-term rentals after 9 PM, so it's ridiculous to have it in there. So yes, it's not, so I don't think it was meant to limit when a guest can go in and it's just like lumping one code into the next and so it caused some issues. Now, that being said, I've only heard one complaint from one person about that section of the code, but it is definitely something that needs to be cleaned up.
Sure. From a larger standpoint, I understand that when this was developed, basically it's trying to prevent displacement from our residential neighborhoods. It's trying to maintain neighborhood character, if you will. There are reasons of trying to allow short-term rentals within the city without it causing a disruption, which other localities and municipalities have experienced from them. I think it'd be important to try to strike that balance along with potentially using short-term rentals as a method of building more housing units in the city, along with student housing, the larger discussion we're having. The reason the student housing is being built is because they will pay a premium over what a single family will pay for a unit. And so with that premium, developers are willing to put their money at risk to build new buildings to be able to supply them housing. And with the study we were shown the other day or the other week, we're not really getting that anywhere outside of student housing. Well, short-term rentals operate similarly, that they will provide a return to operators potentially over and above what a long-term rental will, and that's why people gravitate toward them. Could we use that dynamic as a way of saying that if you, this is just an idea, that if you build an ADU or just a second unit on your house, since we don't really have an ADU ordinance, on your property and you intend to use that as a short-term rental, you can build that extra unit as a way to continue to grow the housing supply in the city, because that extra unit isn't gonna be an STR forever.
You can already do that if you are living in one of the units. Again, this is a hard one and we'll get into it in more, I'm sure, but the code that we put forward in 2001, that's gonna take a while to come into play. I've been here a while. We had a vision in 2020. And it took over 15 years for that vision to start moving forward. Again, these things all take time. And anyway, I just want to throw that out and note that, you know, to be, you know, if the person lives in one of the units, that's great.
But you're saying,
Under current regs.
sorry, just under a different umbrella of affordable housing incentives. Like maybe there's some, well, no, but
Just
like
another
you're
way
just
of
saying
getting
like,
construction to happen.
maybe there's something, if someone was deciding what to do with their property, maybe there's some incentive for a different discussion.
Yeah.
To push more people into the longer term.
My
rental market.
condensed point is just short-term rentals can bring outsized returns. That's why people want to do short-term versus long-term. Can you use that dynamic to try to build housing where a long-term rental housing doesn't pencil? You're also not displacing anybody in residential areas because the house isn't built yet, so there's no one to displace.
Do you have more clarifying questions with a question mark at the end? We will, because I'm gonna let the planning commission talk once the public has had a chance to make their comments.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
No,
thought
that's
this was our
fine.
time.
No.
Oh.
Yeah, this is for us to clarify stuff from staff so that
Alright.
fewer questions from the public and they can have a chance to actually make comments to us.
Perfect. That's my question.
Roseanne, do you have any questions?
I've got a thought, not a question.
Okay, I've got a series of questions. Unfortunately, they're scattered throughout the PDF, so bear with me. What is the current practice for multifamily projects? Suppose like something condominium, or
it's-
like the Belmont Lofts or something.
If you're in if you're in a non-residential district,
Mhm.
then you are considered general lodging under the zoning code. And so that doesn't fall within homestay. So there are other building related things that come up. with that.
But are people generally allowed to, if they're in a condominium, allowed to do an Airbnb?
They do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we work with that, or it's unenforced?
Reed, are you able to speak to that any?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really, for multifamily buildings, you have to get your landlord's permission. And so that prevents many from doing it. I mean, occasionally in like a student housing complex, you'll see them for about a month and then they disappear when the landlord finds out.
I'm thinking
but in-
like a condominium,
but-
like the Belmont Lofts, where people own their unit.
They can do it there.
Okay.
As long as there's no we don't follow like if there's an HOA and they prohibit it, then they wouldn't be able to do it, but we would allow it. As Missy said, it would be general lodging.
You said that Granicus has identified 500 plus of these properties. Do we know how many we knew before we had Granicus?
A couple of hundred.
Okay, so this actually really did expand how many we know about.
Yeah, but again, it's like any sort of data thing. Yes, we see all these dots on the page and, we're like, so we're still digging into that to mine down to an actual, like, we haven't split out the ones that are residential from Granicus. We've done that a different way. And so there's still much work to be done there.
So this data, it's new enough that we haven't had a chance to figure out if all those properties are, to enforce things or to figure out if they're all complying.
There's been some limited with that. Again, we're at the beginning, we're at the time where all the applications are coming in because Todd was able to send out a notice to remind everyone they had to pay. So between that and a notification we sent out to everyone that we have on record, we just got an onslaught. And so we're working through that, but we're getting kind of through that now. And now we're strategizing on the people who have chosen not to apply for permits, but are showing up as having listings.
So you said that we have $100 fee per year. Does that does not cover enforcement currently, or does it, like, how close does that come to paying for the city's costs?
We don't typically cover our costs.
Okay. For the proposed option, the option that may not come to be, 500 for 3 years, would that actually cover our costs?
We figure it would somewhat come closer. It won't completely.
Okay.
But again, we also wanted to be reasonable about a fee. Because, that's how all this works too.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's the cost of doing business, but if it gets too high, then you lose the balance.
Here, I'm gonna break my own rule, and make a comment, just that it seems like that would be the typical non-homestay person, taxpayer subsidizing people who are operating homestays. Seems a little unfair, but sorry, I'll go on from that.
They collect occupancy tax too, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I guess that okay, that is true. 100, these, let's see, all right, yeah, sorry, I think that's all my questions. Unless there are any more clarifying questions, we'll let the public talk. Great. Let's see, you guys wanna moderate, or should I, or how does this work?
I think he has a question. I think Todd was.
Todd's got a question.
Oh, Todd, I'm sorry.
I'm sort of public here today.
Well, your staff, you.
Okay.
Are you being public?
I'm sort of being
You gotta pick a hat.
Commissioner of the Revenue, actually, but it's really part of the presentation. So I'm mostly here to pee in the cornflakes. So I'll answer a couple of questions. The 30-day occupant, or that really has to do with the rules around transient occupancy tax and
I'm good
business
there.
license. Okay.
Yeah.
the 500 or so listings, a lot of times you're gonna find multiple listings for one property. So it tends to inflate that. She's right. We've seen about 250 or so business licenses every year for several years. So I'd say that's a truer number of how many of these we have. With respect to enforcement, in addition to what they have, if you operate a business in the city of Charlottesville and don't get a business license, that's Class 1 misdemeanor. We used to spend a lot of time chasing folks down, and that's actually a pretty stiff fine. The problem with that is, and I'm going to get into this in a minute, the way that the business license interacts with the homestay permit. I am not supposed to issue a business license to somebody until they have their homestay permit. So if I go out spending a lot of time, tracking down somebody on one of these for a $35 business license, and then they don't bother to get the homestay permit, it's a waste of time. And so we have pretty much for years, we were actually the office that was really driving the enforcement of these things. And it's kind of shifted over to these guys, and now we've got Granicus. It's probably going to happen more. What I really want to say here is, if you want to know the single biggest impediment to enforcement, it's the annual fee. And I've expressed that to these guys and whatever. It's the annual fee, because the zoning inspectors spend all their time chasing down checks. That's it, full stop. And then the way that impacts me, I can't issue a business license until the homestay permit's been paid. So the result is that my office sits on hundreds of business licenses that people have filed for and paid for, but that I can't issue because they didn't go to NDS to get the homestay permit. My suggestion has been and remains that the homestay permit, like every other home occupation permit, should be a one-time thing. If you run a hair salon in your basement, you pay $100. Now, I know we've got other fees that, other permits that get renewals. They don't have another license hinging on them. I think Missy pointed out to me that I guess the cafe spaces and the vendors on the mall, that's a fraction of the number of people. They're much easier to track, and they don't have a business license hinging on that. If you guys are going to make a change, the only change that I'm here to advocate for is to make the homestay permit a single time fee. Make it $500, make it $1,000. I don't give a damn, but I don't need to have to deal. It is a huge pain to have to wait to see if they've got their homestay permit before we can issue that. Right now, I got hundreds of people who've paid for the business license. They've got 60 folks who've gotten their homestay permits. So I'm sitting on those licenses. And it's like that every single year. So if you make a change, that's what I'd advocate for. Sorry, Tori, I was going to be any more.
I mean,
That's what I do.
We work with Todd quite a bit, Todd and Bob from his office, as we're working through this. And this is kind of the one thing that we go back and forth on quite a bit, because we understand where Todd's coming from on this. We get that. But the yearly review is really the main time we get to see what changes have happened and be able to make sure that it's maintaining as following the rules from that standpoint. And so that's why we push back on our folks have pushed back on that one, just because of trying to keep things from that enforcement in. But we love Todd. We work with him as we're working with this.
I would just counter that you don't need to collect a fee to enforce the rules. You could do that anyway. Anyway, that's it.
All right.
It's like you're moderating, Chair.
I'm moderating. All right, do we have an online audience?
Yeah.
Shannon, you got it great.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll start the public hearing, starting in person. You can come
Not a
up.
public hearing, just comments from public.
Comment from the public.
Why don't you go ahead, Deborah?
Please state your name. You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm Deborah Weiss. I've been in Charlottesville since 1995. I feel like I'm the poster child for this short-term rental thing. I was instrumental in getting the ADU passed in the early 2000s because I wanted to build a house in my backyard before the city was even upzoned. So that's what I did. And I started short-term renting it in 2013. My house does not face the street. It's in my backyard. It has its own parking. I greet every guest. I've never had one single complaint. The city keeps raising the assessments on properties and the property taxes. And now, without my short-term rental, I would be completely priced out of my neighborhood, and the property taxes that I have to pay now are over $11,000 a year. So I just want to switch it around for a second and let you know that my short-term rental keeps my house affordable to me, okay? And the other point that I want to make is the correlation between somehow affordable housing and short-term rental is, one, for me, I didn't take away housing, I added housing. And second, even if I long-term rented my place, it would not be affordable, okay? My house in my backyard, I feel, is my retirement account. It's my real estate investment, you know, and it's how pretty much I put food on my table right now. And, you know, I need it. And so I think we're all for responsible hosting. And I think I do a really good job. And the other point that I want to make is that this is a business and it's really hard work. And it's not something that people think, oh, I'll just Airbnb my place and make a ton of money. It's a lot of work. And I think a lot of people try it and then they just realize, oh, I'm not going to do this, you know, and then they either long-term rent it or short-term, you know, they long-term rent it or they stop doing it. And third, I think that there's a lot of places that might show up on your software where it's people who rent their house out for graduation or they rent their house out just for football season. You know, they're not like doing it like all the time. So I think that you need to take, you know, the amount of places with a grain of salt. So that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
And just a heads up, we are gonna try to limit these to 3 minutes each. Dana, do you have
They've
a?
got the clock on.
Oh, I can't see it. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, you gotta
Awesome.
switch between online and in person. Do we have any online, people?
Yes, we'll have one after you.
Okay, my name is Chaz Webster. You may have seen some of my emails. Two parts here really. I think some of us have gotten some texts from our STR group that we were a little surprised today. We had thought well, first, we were the ones that came to this meeting last minute finding out about it. And so kind of shared with other people within our group that also are hosts, hey, this is going on. Did you know about this? We didn't. So we didn't feel it was overly transparent. Had some questions then, and that's why we started writing NDS and asking for things to slow down so we could be part of the conversation. And then today our understanding was that they were gonna basically not ask for anything at this point and work on just enforcement and conversation and communication with us, which we've welcomed. It seems that there may have been another agenda and that's confusing to us. I personally have commercial and residential properties with a business partner of mine, many downtown and midtown. A lot of residential units. Some of those we do rent to Airbnb. And I think one of the pictures that and Airbnb companies, people who rent from us and we allow to do Airbnbs. We haven't turned much of our inventory into Airbnb. We keep it as long-term. It's easier to us. We have a lot of it, so it'd be more work for us. That being said, part of the picture that's not painted here is we, without following all the rules and regulations or being regulated like just a citizen in a neighborhood, can turn all of ours into Airbnb and 365 days a year. That seems a little convoluted when we're looking at being stringent and strict on literally citizens in a neighborhood, which also I think the part of the picture missing here is in that neighborhood, there are buildings and stuff that could do the exact same thing as I'm doing. We can turn them all into Airbnbs and remove long-term rentals from the market and take extra expendable income just from citizens, which historically has been proven is spent in the area. They're still gonna take their yearly family vacations, but they won't eat out as much. They won't order out as much. They won't shop locally or spend as much locally. Well, as a person that rents to commercial, this is where we saw, my partner and I, a real problem here. And we know that currently restaurants especially are having a really tough time. And so we want tourism to grow. We want the local people to keep eating out and spending locally. And Todd, I don't know when this started, but as long as I've known about Airbnb, and 99% my understanding of short-term rentals are on one of the two major platforms, the majority being Airbnb. They've collected 14%, 14.5% tax, and 9% has been going to the city without any problem or extra work. It's not like an Airbnb person can't not pay it. So it's almost that, to your point earlier, we should be incentivizing people, certainly in some of these areas where there is upzoning, to build more of these and actually tax them as much as possible and benefit as much as possible from this. So we're not having to constantly just raise property taxes and to be honest, I feel a little under. The last thing, we have a full email and everything we submitted to NDS, we would have submitted to you if we had known that we were actually gonna get in this conversation. So we will get all that out to you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I have Colleen Kelly online with her hand raised. Colleen, would you like to speak?
Yes, sorry, am I unmuted now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for the meeting. I think a couple things. First of all, I appreciate that that we're addressing this, and Missy for your work in the research. I'm glad that the recommendation is to keep everything as it is, because Granicus really hasn't been running for very long. And so you don't really have really great data that's out there. And I think a lot of the problems is, you know, just these people that are gaming the system. And I run a very legal, fully compliant Airbnb, and we actually get hurt by people who are taking advantage of the system. They deflate the prices, they undercut us, they cause problems in the neighborhood, and then we get overregulated. My second point is the fact that just back of the napkin calculations, if Airbnb is generating $1.58 million in taxes and we're only 14% of the occupancy, that means that we're punching above our weight in terms of how much tax revenue we're giving, because of the total amount, that's 15.7% of the total. The third thing is, I would like to say is that whenever I am a community member, I want to reiterate what other speakers have said, is that the Airbnb makes it possible for me to live in Charlottesville and to upkeep my property. Without it, I would be in a world of financial hurt. And it is a lot of hard work, and it is a lot of my hours. So another thing is the fact that whenever we talk about all this, is that we're good with, I guess, the compliance, right? But it would be great that things are paused until we get a better picture of all this. Then I actually had a little bit of a question about one of the data points. It says X amount of the entire house is rented. So I'm a little bit curious, because technically we're like a duplex. And whenever you put things on Airbnb, you either have to say you're renting out a room or you're renting out an entire home. So technically, even though we're an upper under duplex, we would fit into the category, if you're using the Airbnb metrics of entire home, we would fall into that category, but we're not in a situation where we're doing rooms. So I just kind of want to put that out there. And the thing is that as opposed to the Hilton or Marriott taking the money that they earn from short-term rentals and spending it wherever, paying out tax, you know, their dividends to their shareholders, I'm spending all the money that I earn in my Airbnb after expenses in this local community. And so I feel like it's just another thing to think about whenever you're considering the calculus of how much or how little short-term rentals are contributing to the city of Charlottesville. So thank you.
Thank you.
If there's any other online speakers, you may click the raise hand icon and I can call you out.
And then you also have community members here.
Yes, so seeing none, let's even go back into in-person speakers.
Good evening. My name's Sam Galand. I live at 1292 Kenwood, up in Greenbrier. So I came kind of midway through the presentation, so it seems like the agenda is not actually being considered or proposed, but just wanted to offer my comments. So for background, I do not operate an Airbnb, don't really have skin in the game. But I just wanted to kind of speak in support of people's rights to operate a short-term rental. And specifically, I thought that the 8-person maximum was an unreasonable regulation. You know, I think people should be able to rent their property on a long-term basis or a short-term basis. I think some reasonable rules make sense, but the 8-person seems kind of arbitrary. You know, if you have a 6-bedroom house, that seems unreasonable. I also noticed, I guess there's a 6-adult limit. I don't know if that's something that's actually enforced, but that also seems, if that's on the books now, I think that should be reconsidered. I'm not really sure what the reason for that is. And just a couple of points, you know, these rentals provide significant benefits. These are big tax revenue for the city, and these are activity for local businesses. I think if some of these were eliminated, specifically the larger ones, you might just lose some of that economic activity, or maybe it shifts to hotels or shifts to the counties, to Elmore County, and then that goes to county businesses. And this is it's a cool resource for residents. I got married in the city a few years ago, and the wedding party, we rented a big house in our neighborhood, and that was a lot of fun. And if that had not been available, it would have been a very different weekend. So I think, you know, maybe it's a special event, maybe it's graduation, maybe it's a reunion. But, you know, these are often good resources for people who live here. It's an opportunity for homeowners. You know, there's a guy on my cul-de-sac. He's looking at adding a unit, and he's kind of thinking, maybe I'll rent it long-term. Maybe I'll do an Airbnb, but if you take away that option, you might get less housing built. We've kind of given homeowners the tools to add 1 unit or add an ADU. If we increase regulation on what they can do, you're gonna get less of that. And then last, like I said, I don't operate an Airbnb, but there are people that have operated these in good faith and built small businesses. So, you know, what I read in the agenda would really be killing those businesses. And I was very surprised there was no consideration for them. So that's all I had, but I think these are provide meaningful benefits for, you know, people that operate them and others as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Genevieve Keller, 504 First Street North. Once upon a time, I sat where you sat, and it happened to be during the period in which we crafted this ordinance. And we worked on it for months, and we had much debate. We had a very diverse group of people sitting on the commission at that point in time, variety of ages distributed across the city. 2 people who are operating a bed and breakfast or a short-term rental, whatever you want to call it, one sort of independently and one on a platform. Strong housing advocates. And this was really kind of the best we could come up with. There were those who argued for more than 6, and we decided that 6 was based kind of on a 2-person per 3 bedrooms. And any more than that, even then we were thinking about housing our community. Any more than that, then why don't you have an apartment? Because at that point you still could have 1 ADU in your house. So this is really what we came up with. I've been an operator if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I was gonna have this, I would say you're absolutely crazy. Because I spent most of my life being a consultant, flying all over the country, and this is a little bit easier. But the reason I did it was because my son had graduated from college, traveled on a fellowship around the world, and came home, and before he was going to go back to school, he just said, can I have a B&B? These are great things. I've done them all over the world. So I let him do it. And then, you know, like kids do, he left me with the football season all booked up. So mom was left holding the bag. And it turned out to be a pretty good bag. And I have to say, I kind of enjoy it. And along with other people that talk about paying their real estate taxes, in my family, we talk about a great grandmother who raised turkeys. And the family didn't eat the turkeys. She sold the turkeys to pay her taxes. So I make bets to pay my taxes, and I don't have to fly all over the country and stand in a TSA line to be a consultant. So I've enjoyed doing it, have a great number of people. They come for weddings, they come for football, they come for vineyards, they come for sick children, they come for dying parents, they come for lots of things. Because I've been a planning commissioner and I believe in housing, I don't rent anything as a B&B that I could rent as a dwelling unit to a long-term renter. I don't have any kitchen units, and I say in bold letters, no kitchen, support our local restaurants. I think we have as good an ordinance as we could have. I support you keeping what we have now. I think to open up a big can of worms. Missy has talked about what you might have to do. If you do make a change, and hopefully there are ways that you can work with Todd and other ways to collect fees so that you can take care of those things. And there's always another General Assembly session next year. So I think what you're doing now is a good thing. And the only thing is the weak link has been the enforcement. Thank you.
John McDonald online. John, would you like to speak? I think you're muted there. You are trying to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I find this whole thing a little confusing. I'm looking at your current requirements. We're up to 6 adults and any number of children. And then your proposal is 2 adults per bedroom up to 8 people. So in your current requirement, there is no requirement of bedrooms or the number of people, any number of children, which seems to me to leave that open to, quite frankly, an infinite number of people in a house. And now you're saying you can have up to 2 adults per bedroom, up to 8 people. What happened to the children? Is it still unlimited children? And what is your definition of a bedroom? That's it. This is why I find this very confusing. And at one point, you did say that you were increasing the number of people, and I'd like to know how that increase works. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you guys want to answer that real fast, or is that
Read the bedroom question.
It was part of the proposal,
Yeah.
but aren't actual proposals.
right? Well,
Reed, can you speak to the question of bedrooms?
Yeah, sure. So it is limiting. I think it is something that I've talked with the city attorney, and that we would probably allow children to come in as well. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to deal with. And we don't have the answer, but yes. So right now it's 6 adults and any number of children. We've heard from lots of people staying with wedding parties and what have you, and so they're exceeding the occupancy right now. In the future, it would be 8 per home, 2 per bedroom, and we would probably exempt children from that in a proposal. So you could still have families come, and you're getting more. So hopefully that helps answer your question. And once again, I would say through this whole presentation, there's been so much research and so much time spent trying to come up with a proposal, and we ran into roadblocks in many different routes that we were trying to take. And ultimately, with this code section that would open it up to renters to be able to potentially utilize the short-term rental ordinance, we decided to recommend nothing. So that's where we are. Thank you.
More public comments?
I'm Sarah Sheldon. I want to talk about kind of like a couple different separate-ish topics. The first one being, I'm a mom. When I look to go stay places, I don't look at hotels because that sounds terrible. It's like a child. I want an Airbnb. If I'm gonna stay with family, I want an Airbnb. So the last thing that I would want is for the city to make this more difficult for families to come and stay. Or like Charlottesville is very family friendly. And I don't want families to look at it and be like, let's just go stay somewhere else where I can put my kids in a different room to sleep because my child won't sleep quietly. He needs to be on his own so he can mumble. I don't know, kids make a lot of noise. So it's just really nice to be able to go somewhere and have multiple rooms and have a kitchen, have a bathroom with a tub. Like, these are just things that I don't want the commission to forget. But I was actually talking with our cleaner, and most of her business, or all of her business, is Airbnbs. And the same thing applies to a lot of other vendors in the area. And I think that it's important not to forget the financial impact that Airbnbs themselves have. Like, there are cleaners in hotels, there are landscapers for hotels, but like, there are small business owners who rely on that. If Airbnbs became totally outlawed, or if it was just single bedrooms, I don't think, my cleaner's name is Alicia, she's great. If you need a cleaner recommendation, let me know, she's awesome. But if these were to suddenly become single bedrooms, her job would be infinitely more difficult. And she might not have a business at all. So I just wanted to make sure people like her were seen and heard, because I asked her if she wanted to come. She said no, she didn't have time. She's cleaning, so makes sense. But alternatively, I'm actually a wedding photographer in the area. None of my couples want to stay in an Airbnb, much like the gentleman said earlier. His wedding party wanted to stay, or they wanted to stay in an Airbnb, not a hotel. And weddings that I've captured in hotels, they just feel cold and sad and not as comfortable and fun. Whereas the experience that wedding parties, wedding guests, wedding clients have is better in an Airbnb because it feels more communal. And just from that, yeah. I guess the point that I'm making is people like Airbnbs, they want to stay in Airbnbs. And I would personally hate if housing went from like allowing 8 people to like, it has to be 4 or 6. You can have your mom stay with you, and that sounds terrible. Like, I'd like to let more people stay in these Airbnbs so they can have fun, so they want to come here, so they don't go to Charleston or New York City or somewhere else instead. I want them to come here so I can shoot their wedding in an Airbnb that Deborah owns. That sounds great. I think yours is an ADU, but I'd love for them to go there because I actually had a couple stay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I had a couple stay at your Airbnb after their wedding and they loved it.
Thanks.
So, like, I'd rather they have that experience. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robin Seeley and I have a teeny tiny little Airbnb. It's just over 300 square feet. It does not have a full kitchen. It is not going to help solve the housing crisis. I think if that is one of the things that we're trying to do here, and I honestly still not sure exactly what it is that we're trying to solve for. I think you'd have to look individually at each Airbnb to discover whether or not a studio like mine is going to be any great contribution to the city's housing stock. It doesn't have a kitchen, it's a studio, it's teeny tiny. The other thing I'd say is, even though it's a teeny tiny place with, you know, half a kitchen, it is helping me tremendously right now because I'm now retired. I bought the thing in my house in 2019, and in that time since then to this date, my tax bill has doubled. Is actually doubled. I was paying under $5,000 a year. I'm now paying almost $10,000 a year. It would be infinitely harder for me if I didn't have the income from that Airbnb to make a contribution to that cost. So I know there are others who are on the same boat, and we've heard from them. I understand, I'm not the numbers person, but on the STR listserv, there are about 130 people on that listserv. And it's not just people who own Airbnbs, it's also people who own businesses in the city. Because they have a vested interest in keeping Airbnbs open. Because that is what is also bringing folks to their restaurants and restaurants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, I'm Janice Kavanaugh, I live on Douglas Ave. And like Debbie, been doing Airbnb and short terms for a long time, since 2010, when the market real estate kind of tanked. But I have more questions really than comments. Mine doesn't have a kitchen either, so it would never be in the housing stock, but it's my understanding that the Airbnb in Verbo do not itemize the taxes to the city. Like they don't list every property owner taxes, they just send one lump check. Is that correct?
No, they do. They break out by address and gross receipts,
Perfect.
but I can't share it.
No, that's okay. I was told by someone there that they don't, or somebody told me that they just send one check, but.
They do send one check, but they send a report.
Perfect, okay. And then how do you determine if it's 181 days is the cap? Like who's tracking? Nobody. Okay, so it's really not even worth putting that in there because there's no way to police it. I'm not looking at you specifically, but you answer it. Feels like it. And then in reference, someone asked about condos. I sell real estate. The bulk of the condo associations do not allow short-term rentals. So Belmont Lofts or the Gleason and stuff, I'm sure there's people who get by with it and do it. But overall, you have to have like a 60 or 90-day minimum lease, and that lease has to be approved by the condo associations. And then how does the city, I guess, police or determine, because there are companies that manage multiple properties for individual homeowners, and they put them on Airbnb and Verbo, and then those people live somewhere else. So is there any way that the city can determine how that is controlled?
Each
Oh.
each individual property owner is responsible for getting a permit. So it's not up to the state Charlottesville or Airbnb to get a permit for their for the homeowner.
But if that homeowner lives in Ohio, they can't get a permit? Because they don't.
They have to establish their residency in Virginia, provide us with a photo ID and sign the document that says, I swear that I abide by all the regulations and will comply with all your regulations.
Okay. All right, and in reference to the stats you put up earlier, there was the bulk of the properties are 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom, and very low percentage was higher bedrooms. So how are you gonna fit 8, 10 people in the bulk of the places that have 3 bedrooms? If it's 2 people per bedroom?
It would be up to, I mean, the proposal was an up to.
Number of people.
Because based on the potential safety inspection, it would determine how many bedrooms were per building code. And then it could be up to.
But still based on 2 people per bedroom? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more in-person speakers for public comments? Any more online raised hands, for public comments? Chair, I see no more.
All right, thank you. And just to remind the public, again, you can always email us at planningcommission@charlottesville.gov, or there's a link on the city's website on the planning commission's page. All right, so comments from the planning commission. Do this this time, Ross. Go ahead.
Yes. Let me get back to my list of comments from last time. I guess I want to open up the discussion about allowing renters to have homestays. It seems like the proposal to not make any changes by staff is largely predicate on that would then allow renters to have homestays. I don't necessarily see why that's a bad thing. In the current situation, you're allowing homeowners to beef up their own income, like we've heard several times here tonight. I don't know why we would allow that privilege to only be for somebody that owns their property and not somebody that rents their property. Of course, this would need to be part of an agreement between the tenant and the person who leases them their homes. But that's not something that we're here to discuss. I don't see a reason why the city should prevent renters from being able to have their own homestay in their unit. Then an item related to occupancy is maybe a way to get around some of these comments about what the exact number of max people available for a homestay unit should be. I'm pretty sure that there are fire marshal regulations about occupancy of residential units. Leave it up to the fire marshal. And then my last comment that I would make is whatever changes are made, if any, to not make them more onerous than what we're doing for other home occupations in the city and residential areas. The comment from the Commissioner of Revenue about decoupling enforcement from getting a permit or getting a fee, I think is a smart idea. And that's the end of my comments.
Isaiah?
I don't think I've got anything. I think this is headed in the right direction. I would disagree with Ross. And again, I can't wrap an argument around it yet. It just doesn't feel good. So I need to think about it a little bit more. But the idea of tenants, renters, being able to participate in the homestay thing just doesn't feel good. But I need to give that a little more thought to make sure that's where I'm gonna land.
Josh?
I think I'll just be echoing things. I like what we heard from the audience. It sounds like the ordinance that we have now, the goals make sense, the rules mostly make sense. I think it would be a mistake to drop the max number of nights to 90 days. That sounds much more onerous and for no public benefit. I also don't think it would be smart to remove the residency requirement like has been suggested. I think having the goal of having owner occupied homes that do Airbnb, as long as the owner lives there, that's working fine. Let's keep doing it. I also don't see any public interest in preventing tenants from renting out part of their home, especially because it would require the landlord to approve it. And if they don't like it, they could say no. So I think it would be a marginal change. I think most people would say, no, you can't do it. But I don't see why I would tell a landlord they can't let their tenant rent out part of the property. I do possibly like the proposed change to require the affidavit, although I think Reed mentioned there already is one. It's in the document, so I'm not sure. But I think requiring the owner to say, yes, I live here. Some of them don't, and people don't like lying, I hope. And signing a document saying, I'll follow the rules. I wouldn't mind that happening. I certainly wouldn't want to use the fear of tenants renting out part of the unit to prevent us from doing things that are useful. But mostly I'm happy with the proposal of not making changes because I think the main problem is enforcement. That's out of the scope of what we can do here. And the regulations sound mostly in good shape to me. I wouldn't want to make this any harder for anybody to provide the service to the community. So stop there.
Yeah, I would echo the same comments. And I think the tenant thing, maybe that it's good that nothing's happening now. That could be a future study, but it seems like there's a lot of the subleasing, because we have student, this and that. I mean, that's kind of happens in a way. There's a lot more of these informal, someone's going abroad, they need someone to stay there for 2 months. So maybe there's something around that perspective to think about. But I'm glad I learned a lot more about this through this process, whether or not it was a little messy. And I'm glad we heard from people who are providing these, and I'm, you know, again, I think what we have now, it seems to be working as well as it can. And so maybe with time, with the new software, there'll be new opportunities to make some smaller changes if needed, but I'm good with what we have.
I'm on the same page. I think it's process seems to be going in the right direction. I don't want to, you know, unreasonably curtail short-term rentals. I do think on the issue of tenants being able to do short-term rentals, I don't think it's good if we're in a place where we can't update the ordinance because we don't want to comply with a state law. So I get that, like, kind of quickly putting in place a way to manage this. Like, how do we track that the owner has given permission to the tenant? That's kind of an administrative headache, but I hope that we can figure that out in the future so that we're not stuck with a frozen code that we can't update because we don't want to allow tenants to rent out as short-term rentals. Okay.
I have a few comments, and first I just want to thank the public for coming out and speaking. I didn't announce earlier when I said I didn't have any questions, but I'm a non-voting, the UVA rep for the Planning Commission. My name is Michael Joy, I'm Associate University Architect there. So my comments here, again, are not framed as a representation of the university or anything along those lines. And I did want to thank Missy for the great presentation. I found it to be very informative and sort of thought-provoking. And so one of the things I was just going to throw out are just some questions and also maybe some recommendations of possible ideas. And hearing from the community, you know, part of me is wondering, it sounds like it's the kind of the people who aren't conforming with the current one that seems to be causing the issue. And so the idea, the enforcement sounds, it's too onerous for the local, you know, for our government to do, and it's hard and tricky legally and this and that. But I was curious if we could transfer that onus to Airbnb and VRBO and the others, that they can only collect fees, their booking fees, if they're doing business with a legally certified property.
No, I can tell you.
I'm thinking, because maybe this is a state level thing we could work with, maybe they could do a Commonwealth thing that I don't understand why, if they're sitting there saying that they're having accommodation, that accommodation is not in conformance with local law, how they can make money on that.
I know in overseas, if you've got it in certain countries, you have to be licensed and show your license at the bottom. So yeah, maybe there's a way to do it.
And I understand this is a bigger question. It may not be Charlottesville, but maybe it's a bunch of communities can come together. I just think it's crazy that they can profit on not being genuine with what they're offering as being legal. Because I feel like there's people who are following the rules, who are doing it and making limitations, and you have other people who aren't. And there's, anyway, it's just the big software company which has no presence in this town seems to be benefiting the most from these issues. So that was one. It seems like there's a number of college towns across the country that have heightened or enhanced their STR restrictions, or they fully have prohibition on it because they are dealing with the same housing crisis that we are dealing with and the same cost of living crisis. And I was curious if the city has had any chance to be in conversation to see, some of them adopted them a number of years ago. And it seems like some of the anecdotal stories are quite beneficial. I was just curious if we're getting you know, we were a thought leader when we adopted this back in the day, and it seems like there's some other communities that kind of have chosen a path. And I'd be curious if it's actually helped their housing issues and their cost of living. And then the last one I was thinking of is I wonder if there's a way, you know, with these private equity firms snatching up properties all over town, empty houses that are being used as Airbnbs, like Danny mentioned, we all see them in our neighborhoods. Could we consider a 2-unit minimum in order to apply for a homestay? Like, could you, your property, which is in RA, RB, but you have to have 2 units there, whether it's an ADU, whether it's it has to be an ADU. And so the reason I'm saying this is, in order to get the ADU, you have to go through NDS, you have to get permitted, you have to have it inspected, it has to be up to code, it has to be safe, it has to meet all the necessary requirements. And then once you have 2 units on the property, it sort of implies that you live in one of them. And I feel like it doesn't take a perfectly suitable home for a family and just have no one lives in it, and it's constantly illegally being used as a short-term rental. But it seems like most people, if not everyone who came up today, is doing that, where they have a 2-unit property. And I just wonder if that's kind of like a very simple way to leverage something that could protect the people who again are following the rules. So that's all I had.
Sorry, we don't have two units. We have our houses and then we have like a basement.
I know, but I think I think Indias would call that a 2-unit, right? If you had an ADU basement and the main residence. Maybe I'm not using the language right.
Me, I have two.
No, but I think even
That's my
you can have
backyard.
an ADU in your basement, and I think am I wrong? Is that a 2-unit when you?
There is no such thing anymore as an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
It's just units.
Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. So the ADU language told units is a new language.
I have 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and they use the front door. It's part of my house, so it's not any separate section. It's a separate section, but it's not like an ADU and it's not a basement. It's 2 bedrooms I don't need, so I rent them to the public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be the thing that would maybe be the risk, because you're doing it right, but that most of the people, at least my anecdotal, I see empty houses that no one lives in there 158 days a year.
I get that.
Yeah.
part, because,
And you could make conversions to your home to make those units.
I'm not gonna spend money to accommodate stuff that
I mean, other people
I'm making
do.
money off of it to
I
pay
get
my
that.
bills.
Just trying to find a way to create a level playing field that it can be enforced.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't want to jump in ahead of you. Yeah, I tend to agree the idea of holding off on doing updates just because of the not wanting tenants to participate. Seems a little odd to me. I know it's already happening. I mean, I have friends who rent who also do Airbnbs, and I guess it's a matter of time till you guys find out or don't. It does help them. It helps them pay their rent. I mean, it's something it's useful to them, and it makes Charlottesville affordable to them to be able to do that. And it seems like we don't want to ever step in the way of people being able to rent out their houses for graduation weekend. I mean, that's one time a year. Doesn't seem like it's a bad thing. I don't know. I don't want to make this so onerous that people can't just do a one weekend out of the year or something that they rent out their houses and make some extra cash. Yeah, the enforcement thing is frustrating. It seems like we still need to work on that. Let me see, sorry. All these notes and questions mixed up together. So the fees thing, I mean, if we do end up making a change, I think it would be important if we find a way to cover our costs. And the $500 for 3 years, that would effectively prevent tenants from using this process anyways, if we wanted to go ahead and update. I have a feeling that someone who rents probably, they may not want to spend $500 to have a 3-year license for something that they may only have a year to, they're leasing year to year. And it is an awful lot of money, to just, if you're only gonna be renting for a few weekends or something. Yeah, and I guess the cap on 6 units or 6 people that we currently have, or 6 adults does seem, I mean, we are a wedding community, and it does seem like I imagine that there probably are a number of business owners there or Airbnb operators that are upset about that they can't lease out their larger house for, more than 6 individuals. I mean, is it?
There are yes, concerns have been raised for folks in larger places, but as the number of people increase, the external impacts increase.
And are those parking or what are those external impacts that we?
Parking and is definitely one of them. Noise concerns as you get lots of people together. Reed, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that question.
Yeah, I would just say parking and noise, vehicles, especially in the houses that don't have an off-street parking, adds more to the neighborhood. And frankly, I mean, that's the major concern that we hear is that these are groups that are getting together. They're excited. They're, reunions. And so they're gonna stay up late every single weekend. It's like being next to a party house often because you're gonna have large groups of people. And there are operators that actually have pretty good policies and they hold their tenants or renters to those policies, like noise policies and what have you. And that works really well in like well-managed properties, but then there's also others that don't. So that's where we hear from is the people that are not operating it responsibly.
I guess whatever we do, we're probably not gonna be fully satisfied, so I don't. Yeah, I mean, you've put a lot of work into this, so thank you for that. I just, yeah, my 2 cents are the tenant thing is already happening. I'm not sure I see the problem with that, but if updating the code has other implications, then yeah, I don't know. Final thoughts for anyone else? Commission?
Can I do one? Sorry. I just want to echo something that Commissioner Harness said earlier about how to regulate problems. You mentioned the fire code. If there's a safety concern about occupancy, put in the fire code. If there are concerns about parking, that belongs in permit parking. Concerns about noise belong in the noise ordinance. None of these are all concerns that I share, but they're not concerns with STRs, they're concerns with people. And they have their place being regulated in other areas in the STR regs. Sorry, I'm done.
No, it's true, and I think is it right that's still, we have to find a way to enforce it?
Yes, I mean, when these concerns happen, we want the responsible party to be able to get some relief. I said that wrong, sorry. The fire marshal has been at the table with us, by the way, throughout this proposal. So that lens has been part of contributing to the discussion. But when there's a situation where things are not going good at a Airbnb, I mean, folks are encouraged to call the police for activities that are not occurring properly, but ultimately the owner ends up in a responsible spot. And so again, most people do the right thing. And then there's the things that make it difficult for all the people who are doing the right thing.
So what I'm hearing her comment is that there are some of these other avenues to go down, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to the owner. So maybe instead of having individual occupancy limits and noise limits and X, Y, and Z and parking limits, as part of the permit, there's just a line that sort of references those other things that says if your occupants aren't following those limits, we have the ability to pull your permit as a way around that instead of having completely new occupancy limits and those other things. Just an idea.
Yeah. I guess it'll be interesting to see what council thinks. If that's it, I guess we should move on to in chambers. Thank you for, sorry that we moved you to the end of the agenda.
I'll buy you.
So I'm Ben Chambers, I'm the Police Transportation Planning Manager. You often get a chance to come speak with you. You don't really have a lot of like transportation items that come up regularly as part of your business. So I appreciate the chance to come give you an update. Part of this update is telling you when the next time I'm coming back to speak with you is. So have a fun spoiler right back in there. So first I want to introduce my team. I know we don't have two safe routes to school coordinators, so I'll clear that up. My team is me, Tommy, Kyle, and Zoe. Tommy is our bike ped coordinator. Kyle is our safe routes to school coordinator, and Zoe is our transit planner. And I am our coffee. Next slide, please. So you can probably tell from our job titles, we touch on quite an array of different topics. So we do transit planning. We work with schools to do planning to get people to school safely. We work on traffic calming with public works partners and fire department as well. We have helped set the sidewalk priorities, which inform the CIP. That's usually when I come to speak with you, is once a year to talk about the CIP. And the biggest item that we usually have in the CIP is the sidewalk priorities. We're also responsible for planning out corridor and intersection improvements, and we operate some biking and walking programs. So that translates into a pretty long list of projects that we're working on. This is just a sample of what we're working on, probably just the highlights of what we've got on our plate today. We've got a STARS study with VDOT that we're doing right now for the intersection in the middle of town at West Main and Ridge. That will turn into the city's first smart scale application in 4 years if it's endorsed by City Council in July. We've got a second STARS study that we're working with on VDOT on that also involves the county, and that's for 250 North and the 29 North and the 250 bypass.
Could you remind me what
Yes.
this acronym means?
STARS is a VDOT program. It is a specific planning program. They have STARS program and pipeline program. They both kind of do the same thing. They're basically just VDOT doing a planning study. It has some very long acronym like strategically targeted, blah, 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 blah. But it just means VDOT is coming in and doing a study, and they're planning on doing this study so that it will support a smart scale application down the line.
Strategic, yeah. I was gonna say strategically targeted affordable roadway solutions.
Yes.
So got it.
So we do a lot of work coordinating with VDOT. They don't actually own roads in Charlottesville aside from the bypass. So a lot of it is them coming to us and saying, we know that this is a regional or statewide need that we need to address here, and it's in the middle of your city. How can we work together? So we've had a great opportunity to work with them on West Main and Ridge, and then further work with them going up 29. We also work closely with the region and with our transit agencies to expand and improve transit. That includes realigning routes, putting in new bus stops. So we're doing that with the Route 2. That is an expansion out into the county, which will allow city residents to connect to such glamorous locations as the jail, but also to the Mill Creek Shopping Center and PVCC. We're also looking through all of our bus stops while we do that. We've already performed an inventory on all of our bus stops to understand what's on the ground today. Kind of surprisingly, we didn't already know the answer to that, but now we do. And that's going to help us set up the next step of how do we improve what's on the ground? What are our priorities and where should we be spending money to put more shelters, benches, look at lighting, look at traffic bans, look at improvements to our signage. So we are working through that. At the same time, we're working with the county to figure out how our regional transit authority is going to work and what priorities it has and where it wants to spend its money once it potentially gets a funding source. We also, as I mentioned, support access to schools. One of the biggest changes that we've had in that front this year is updating our city code around school zone flashers. Our city code had outdated names for schools. It was missing some school names. And it didn't provide consistent guidance on what the speed limit should be when school is in session and what it should be when it's not in session. We standardized that to it should be 25 when school is not in session. That's the maximum speed in front of the school, and then when school's in session to 15. We are rolling out the changes to those signs now. The other issue is there are some spots where we didn't have signs where we want to expand our signage coverage. So Kyle is working through a lot of that right now. We operate a few different biking and walking programs. One of them is our e-bike voucher pilot program that gives vouchers to city residents 4 times a year, quarterly basis. We put out a lottery and say, hey, sign up if you want to do this. We got a lot of interest last year. We got, I believe it's 90 vouchers were actually redeemed. So there are 90 new bikes out on our streets. This year, we changed that program just a little bit so that we could sort of tier the vouchers that we're giving out so that we could target some higher value vouchers to folks who wouldn't be able to afford a bike on their own. So the top tier of voucher now allows a low income resident who can demonstrate that they are participating in low income assistance programs, that they will be able to cap a $1,500 voucher that will give them a bike at one of our local bike shops.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You said 90 of them were redeemed. How many of them were issued?
believe it was over 100. We were
So-
close to 110, so it wasn't 100% redemption rate because people were getting them and then going to the bike shop and saying, I don't really want to buy a $1,500 bike because I only have a $1,000 voucher. So there was some of that. There was also some feedback that we got around bike parking and where am I going to put this thing? There were folks who live in some of our public housing who were saying, I don't really have a place to lock this up. I don't really want to store this in my living room. What do I do with this? So that's a different, process that we're working through is figuring out the parking question. But with this program specifically, we wanted to address that issue of, okay, what happens with the folks who can't afford that full time? So that's the big change this year.
A vast majority of them were still redeemed.
Vast majority, yeah. The other big change with that program this year is we've added on an additional $100 voucher for all of our winners that we're calling our safety voucher that is to be used for helmets or locks. We wanted to make sure everybody had those tools so that they were storing their vehicles safely and also riding them safely. Along with that, we also have our monthly walk series. This is our official walks that we do in neighborhoods every second Sunday of the month. We rotate around the city, so we get to check out a different neighborhood every month. It's been a great way to engage with the community, learn what they're seeing, and also get to point out some things that we're working on along the way. We have a slightly less official weekly bike ride that does a similar thing, not as programmed and or as advertised as our neighborhood walk series, but we love having people come out on both and see the city with our eyes. The last one before I'll jump into the big bold one is our Rose Hill Drive restriping concept plans. This was an opportunity that came up because Rose Hill Drive is going to be repaved in 2027. We saw that as an opportunity to change some of the striping on Rose Hill so that it could serve all the users who are trying to use that corridor. Right now, you're looking at a Rose Hill Drive that is very wide and sort of delineated with a series of different lines. It's 35-mile-per-hour road in front of a county school. So that sort of goes against our issue that we pointed out with our school zone flashers. We want to slow down traffic on that road so it's safer for the school uses, for the folks who are using the corridor, biking and walking and using transit. So we kicked off this project with the neighborhood at the beginning of this month with a walk audit up and down the corridor. We'll be returning to them in April with some design options and hopefully moving to council with a preferred alternative that's been vetted and discussed with the community in June. The last big one on the list is what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about this evening. We are working on scoping out a citywide mobility plan. So this is the item I'll be coming back to you with later, but we'll talk through sort of what the process looks like for this and what the timeline is. So Patrick. So first, why do we need this? Why do we need a citywide mobility plan? So our comp plan actually points to this as a strategy for how we are going to achieve our goals. It says secure funding for a transportation master plan as part of its goal number 1 for complete streets. I can say that we have achieved that goal already. Council has already set aside funding for this effort. So we can say we checked a box on that, but there's other items under goal number 1 that we need to work on to be able to create that connected network for all users. This was also something that we identified as staff last year. In January of 2025, we rolled out the Safer Streets strategy, which was a phased strategy for us to work on sort of the small problems and the big problems all at once. This was sort of the second phase of our strategy. Our initial phase was focusing on sort of spot improvements and existing work that we already had on the books. Phase 2 is looking at things like rewriting all of our plans, sort of bigger in scope. Phase 3 is implementing those plans. So this is a step along the way that we've been following for a little over a year now. And part of the reason that we identified this as a need last year was we were trying to turn to our existing plans and figure out what we were supposed to do next and finding a lot of conflicts. We were finding that they weren't coherent amongst themselves. And so some plans would be emphasizing one mode or over another. Some would be saying we need to be considerate of these factors versus those. And in the end, they all had priority lists that didn't really jive with each other. So we needed to come up with a way to do that. The other thing we needed to do was look at our comp plan and say, where did we make progress? Where do we have updates to these strategies and goals? Because some of this stuff is, 5 years old. So where do we need to make updates there? And where are the gaps? Where are the things that we need to make progress on? So our goals for this is got to advance that vision of the comprehensive plan, so that we can have multimodal access, equity, sustainability, and healthy communities addressed through this plan. It's got to prioritize actionable strategies that build connection across the transportation modes. So not just a plan of wish and dreams, but things we can actually go out and do. It will improve system performance through measurable implementation focused outcomes. So how are we going to measure whether we're actually doing what we're saying correctly? And in the end, this needs to support the city's mission to be a place where everyone can thrive. Mobility and making sure that you can get both to home and to work and to all of the other things that make life a joy are important to that goal. So next slide. The key elements of what we're doing as part of this scoping effort. The first one up top is something that we already did back over late fall, early winter, which was look at our comp plan and see where we're at. It was a pretty high level overview to sort of understand what goals we've achieved and what things we've already made much progress on and where do we need to fill in those gaps. That sort of highlighted we needed to take a even closer look. Not everything that the city has said about transportation is captured in the comprehensive plan. So we wanted to do a deeper dive to see, are there goals and strategies that the comprehensive plan isn't even addressing? That existing conditions assessment is something we're working on right now. And it's not just looking at, demographics or what's the current physical infrastructure on the ground. It's also looking at our existing plans and saying, what has happened out of these? What data do we still need? What data do we have? And sort of laying the groundwork for identifying where the missing links are. That will help us start writing out a scoping report, which will summarize sort of key topics and key deliverables that we're looking to achieve with this plan. Our scoping report will also include an engagement plan, which will align the expectations for how we are going to be talking to people about what this plan is along every step of the way. And as we do this, we're also coming to you and other stakeholders to solicit your feedback on that existing conditions report and on the scoping report. Patrick, next slide. So the timeline for this, right now we are working through the internal draft of the existing conditions report and the scoping report. In May, we will have Bike Month, which will be a big ton of events that we'll be talking about, but we'll also be doing a lot of engagement for the scoping of the mobility plan. On May the 5th, we plan to release the existing conditions report and draft scope report on the Connect Charlottesville project page for the mobility plan. On May 7th, we'll be presenting those materials to BPAC. And on May 7th, we'll also be opening up a public survey on the Connect Charlottesville page that's related to the key topics within the scoping report so that we can get a feel for what are the priorities of the community. We'll be talking to BPAC and getting their feedback on the 7th, but we also want to hear from the broader community. And then on the 26th, I'll be back here to speak with you so that we can also solicit your feedback and make sure that that's incorporated. We will be going to council on June 1st. I typically go to council in late spring every year to give them sort of an update on what's going on with transportation planning kind of work. This is that opportunity this year, and it's largely going to be focused on the mobility plan and the scope that we're recommending to move forward with. During June, we'd be finalizing that scope based on feedback that we received from you, from council, from the public, and then working with our procurement team to get consultant support for that scope sometime this summer. And next one. Oh, didn't show up, great. So if you want more information, we'll be posting information on the Connect Charlottesville webpage for the mobility plan. It's connect.charlottesville.gov/CMP. Not a ton of info up there at the moment, but it will start fleshing out as we get an existing conditions report, a draft scope document, and a survey posted there. I believe that's the end of my slide, so happy to answer any questions.
Is that schedule that you just posted going to be on the Connect Charlottesville site?
Is that on there yet?
It's the generic schedule at the moment.
That's all of those steps.
I think we have it based on month, but we can flush that out further.
Questions?
When the Rose Hill restriping, I seem to recall, I don't remember, it was they talked about a Rose Hill, some of the upcoming projects, it was like a mini roundabout, I don't remember what ones, is that including that one that's at
So the
Madison?
mini roundabout is actually partly why we stumbled across the repaving project and saw this opportunity. We were going to our public service team to say, all right, we're gonna go put this on the ground. And they said, oh, hold up a minute, we're gonna repave that road soon. So maybe you don't want to do that.
Got it.
When we got that feedback, we said, oh, now we actually have a little bit more window to go to the community and see if there's a different thing they might want to have here. Mini roundabouts could be an option. Right now,
That's back on the table.
yeah,
Okay.
so
All right.
that we will be coming to the community in April, on April 13th. We'll be doing a public engagement event that will show off design options for Rose Hill.
Yeah.
It won't be saying like, this is the full corridor, but it'll give you different opportunities at different points. Like an intersection might look like this, or a straight, a cross section of a street might look like this. Many roundabouts could be a design option that's on the table, but it's just something we want to solicit.
I'm just
feedback
happy to
on.
hear it's that holistically, because I couldn't tell if I was like something I dreamt to, or it actually happened. So, thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
I'll just share a couple of quick, like, high-level thoughts on the mobility plan. So I would just encourage you at a high level to like use clear language with the community. I think transportation people, and I put myself in this camp, like we use a lot of jargon, you know, we're improvements, level of service, all this stuff. And like people want to think like, well, do I have options for getting places? Like if I want to walk, can I do that? Or do I have to drive? And like, I think one of my favorite transportation thinkers is Jarrett Walker, which I think you probably know well. And I once got to participate in like one of his transit network redesigns, and so much of the process was just focused on, well, we have trade-offs. You can have this and we can have that, but we can't necessarily have everything. So what do we want to do? And what are your priorities and goals and values? And I just thought that was very clear and valuable. And one example, I think, I've seen a lot of like level of stress analyses for bike plans, and I personally really hate them. I think it's like simpler to just say, well, are we a NACTO member city, Charlottesville? Yeah. Okay, so like NACTO has the all ages and all abilities guidance for bike network design. And I've seen some cities where they do plans, it's like, are you really close to an all ages and all abilities facility so that if you're 8 or 70, you can like, there near you. And that's something that I think people can kind of be like, yeah, not like your level of stress is 70, so anyway, that's my main thing is like, let's be really clear, legible, speaking language that people actually think about and talk about trade-offs and priorities. So really excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, and I think it's very important to raise that topic of the trade-offs. A lot of what we saw in our plans, and the reason that it was hard for us to make choices with our existing plans was that they didn't really tell us what to do when we had that trade-off discussion to have. When we have a plan that says, yes, a bike lane should be here, yes, a sidewalk should be here, yes, parking should be here, and yes, 2 travel lanes should be here. And there's only enough room for 1 lane of parking and 1 lane of travel, which is a lot of our streets. It doesn't really tell us which one and what mode is most important for them. So working through how are we going to make those decisions is really partly what we're trying to solve here. That will be part of our scoping effort, is coming up with how do we develop policy that tells us what to do in those situations.
Yeah, and I think like getting council to go through a process where they think about the trade-offs and like where do they fall will really help, get political buy-in for maybe some challenging corridors and things like that.
I got some questions, a couple random ones, and then some about the plan. You mentioned school speed limits, and I think you used the phrase when school's in session. Do you mean like all the entire school day, or drop off and pick up time?
No, it's just drop off and pick up.
Okay, that's what I thought. I was hoping
It's
it was
drop
all
off
day.
and pick up
Okay.
during the time of year when they're in session.
Next year we'll get. Let me see. Oh, you mentioned, I know you aren't covering everything that you do. You mentioned traffic calming. A bunch of it, as you know, went up last year. There's your website, not a website which lists more projects. And after that initial rush of projects, which was great, I haven't seen much more construction and much more planning there. Is that an active area of work between now and the end of this plan, or is that on hold?
It's an active area of work that we're discussing with Public Works. What's the next step of what that looks like?
Okay, but that'll be continuing before the plan's adopted.
Yes, I mean, there's still evaluation on these projects that needs to happen. There's still consideration of whether there are things that we want to keep on the ground. Some of those were testing kind of things, so that's still something that Public Works is valuable.
I would encourage you to encourage whoever can do this to keep the websites up to date with both project status, evaluations. I was just at FNA a week or two ago, and people have a lot of interest in this topic, and they will email you, Wes, if they can read more on websites. Me too. I know it's not your
To
website.
share that feedback with other people in the organization as well.
I'll ask you later. I don't always know who owns what website, but
So the manager's office is a good place to start.
okay. Oh, yes, thank you. Yes. Okay, some questions about the mobility plan. I appreciate your diagnosis of why the current plans have not led to the progress that we hoped for. Because I think uncontroversially, as you've said, the plans are in conflict. They ask for things that can't all happen at once. And so as a result, not much happens. I think since we adopted any of the plans, take your pick, we have not really built much of the facilities that you're talking about anywhere in the city. So I think having a single plan, I think having a plan that allows things to be built will be really important, as you said. I would love to see in your planning process for the plan, having whatever you can written down about implementation, such that implementation and metrics and concrete goals, so we can check in after a year or 2 or 3 and say, we aren't meeting our targets and we couldn't get the right of way and we're stuck on this and we're going to adjust, and not just have goals that we can't measure progress towards. But I would love to see in your implementation chapter, we'll evaluate each year like this. We'll report to council in this way with the following metrics, so we can tell how it's going without having to wait for someone to tell us after 10 years, oh, it's not working, sorry. I think you're the expert, but I would love to see things like goals around actual lane miles of whatever built, about measuring car VMTs, about measuring mode share. If we could say, for example, here's our current mode share for different modes, here are our goals for 10 years from now. The more this can be in the plan so we can see how we're doing, I think the better it's going to work. I don't think we have much of that right now, but tell me if I'm wrong.
I think we don't have very much of it right now, but I do think that's an area that we have definitely highlighted the need for more of that so that we can keep track of our progress, which is largely the reason that we stood up the strategic office in the city manager's office.
Right.
So I'm sure our new chief strategic officer, Jen Hendrick, is going to make sure that I am including this as part of our planning. But it is part of our goals around this, is to make sure that we have actionable, measurable things that we can be doing going forward, and not just a list of projects that we'd like to be able to do.
Right. And I specifically will, sorry to repeat, I want to know what your reporting will look like every year after the plan's adopted, which I think it sounds like you're doing, but that'll be great to see. And then last question about the mobility plan. How much are you all working with sustainability? Because I can't really separate transportation from climate in my mind. They're kind of the same issue. I think transportation is now, according to Crystal's office, the biggest source of emissions in the city and the only source that is growing. And so I would love to hear how that's part of how that team and that goal is part of your process.
Yeah, and so they're one of the many people who's going to be engaged pretty heavily in this process. So they're part of our project team for this, the scoping effort specifically. And I would assume that they're going to be pretty heavily engaged throughout the entire process of planning. But I mentioned they're just one of many of our partners. We're also partnered with folks not even in the city. Our partners over in Albemarle County they're actually going through the exact same parallel process as us. They hired on a new principal transportation planner, and her job is write a countywide mobility plan. So they are having a series of meetings sort of in parallel with us, where they are informing their planning commission and their board of supervisors and their local advisory committees on the exact same process that we're going through in the city. We're trying to align those to make sure that we're speaking the same language, that we're talking about the same needs, because a lot of people don't know where those boundaries are. So we want to make sure that, you know, if we're talking about improving mode shares for biking and walking, we're accounting for some of that is trips that are coming from Albemarle County that we need to account for too.
Thanks.
I think along those lines, I would just add, well, and I know you guys already do this, but sitting on Parks and Rec, you know, the trails are always like a super popular topic. So making sure that there's any connections or shared funding for that. And then also just density neighborhood wise, like I'm thinking, the whole South First Street, Friendship Court areas, gonna have a lot more population, West Haven. I've been in a lot of meetings in the past where people have a lot of questions about bus stops and where they are and can they be moved when there's changes happening already in the neighborhood. And so just making sure that some of those big projects that are happening get aligned with, you know, the best possible bus stops for people who have trouble getting to bus stops, but.
Yeah, on the parks point, luckily their plan is not that old. So it's not sort of one of these ones that we're dusting off and saying, man, this doesn't really match up with anything we're doing. Their plan was adopted last year and it had a pretty robust trails strategy aligned with it. That's definitely something that we want to make sure is aligned with anything that we're planning for the rest of the transportation network, because it's part of the transportation network. So yeah, that will definitely be a part of it. And then yes, bus stop planning, always going to be a part of our transportation network, and always going to be a question that comes up of how can we move those. Around bus stop planning, it's actually getting harder to move bus stops, because a lot of people think of a bus stop just being a sign in the ground, and it's a lot more than that now. If we cannot put out a bus stop now, we can't make a new bus stop or change a bus stop without having a 5-by-8 foot concrete pad that we can have someone in a wheelchair roll off of a bus and onto safely. Putting out an 8-by-5 foot concrete pad sort of makes that permanent. So when we're talking about moving stops,
I guess
as soon as the concrete's poured.
yeah, and I was thinking more of these like big developments that are under construction where there's time to plan for that, not necessarily small, you know, moves. But when I've been hearing about things, it's usually like 5 or 10 years down the line, like, oh, maybe this would be a possible location, but then I don't know what happens to that. But yeah, like when things are already maybe torn up. Yeah.
Well, and to the point of the larger developments, our zoning code changes have changed their requirements for what they need to do when they submit site plans. And part of that change is they have to not just do a traffic impact analysis, but a traffic demand management plan, if they're above a certain size. So your larger public housing developments or any private developments, they're sending those in and saying, this is where we think people are walking, this is where we think people are biking, this is how we think we're going to draw down the amount of vehicular trips that are going to impact this neighborhood. So we have that opportunity built into code in a way that we didn't prior to the zoning code. So that gives us some flexibility before we get the mobility plan passed, but the mobility plan will also provide us with some policies that will inform how we review those TDM plans and direct.
Any questions from Listen or comments?
For your timeline,
yep,
you have through this summer having contracting with a consultant to put together the plan.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of idea of when we might have an adopted plan?
It depends on how fast procurement goes, but then beyond that, I would say it's probably going to be like an 18 to 24 month process to get through.
So that puts us at
summer of 28.
Okay. I'm glad we're getting this started now. I figured that could be the answer, but I just wanted to get that out there. Then, I've been looking through the comprehensive plan and trying to understand all of the various appendices that come with the transportation section of the plan, and there are numerous ones. And the transportation, I mean, the name of this describing or leaving me, the like master plan for transportation, then references like 6 other plans. So is this mobility plan you're discussing intended to replace all of that spider web of various plans?
Yes.
Okay. That would be good, because right now it is, as you probably know, very hard to follow and figure out what's actually happening. So I think if we could streamline and minimize the number of appendices for the transportation section would be helpful.
Yeah, it may not cover everything that all of those cover, because some of them were like small area plans that we adopted into the transportation master plan section of the comprehensive plan. We're not going back and updating these small area plans necessarily as part of this effort, but sort of the bigger, like the bike ped master plan, the streets that work, those kind of larger efforts that were around specifically transportation. That's what this is aimed at simplifying and streamlining.
Okay, I like that a lot. We've talked about it a few times, but the integration of CAT into this plan. CAT is an organization that spans jurisdictional boundaries and has funding from the county. I'm coming from the position of transit is an extension of walkability and bikeability of a city. You can make a pedestrian's trip much longer using good transit, even across the city or into the county, if you will. How deeply integrated are we expecting CAT to be into this mobility plan?
So some of the answers around how we would want the CAT network to be laid out are going to be addressed before we really get into this plan, because we're working on the CARTA prioritization study right now. So sort of the regional big lines that you might see heavy investments on for high frequency service or weekend service or late night service, a lot of those are going to be sort of laid out on the network already. And then when we get into the mobility plan, we can talk about, you know, where do people within the city specifically need additional access to that network? Where are there places where they have challenges on a local level, not on a regional level, to access to a bus stop at a regional service? Or where do we need access to a bus that may not be serving a regional purpose, but is just going into a neighborhood and serving maybe on a lower frequency, but is serving an access need in the neighborhood? Those are the kinds of questions and policies we can talk about in the mobility plan. But I think a lot of the larger scale, like what does the basic bones of the system look like? You should probably be more interested in the CARTA prioritization study if you're interested in influencing.
Okay, that's good information. It also sounds like the cadence of these studies and plans is working in our favor. Whether that was planned or not, I don't know, but.
Sure.
You planned CARTA to pop up? I like that answer. Okay, good. Yeah, I think this is really a pertinent conversation. There's been a lot of discussion over the many years previous to me being here and even in the city about development and housing and that sort of stuff. And we hear a lot of comments about parking issues in neighborhoods. You've heard that for today, specific to short-term rentals, about how one of the primary nuisances that those bring is parking on the street, and having a good mobility plan and a plan that is actionable that we can work towards can really also help mitigate some of those issues that the development that the city is hoping to have in the near future. These are really going to work together well. So I'm excited that this mobility plan is coming up now. That's it for me.
My only question is, I guess at some point there had been floated the idea of some sort of transportation mobility committee. Is that something that would be part of this, or is that you guys would stick with just the typical stakeholders? And
we're trying to figure out how we will have a stakeholder group that sort of stewards this along, and that might be what we go with, but we're still sort of fleshing out with that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you see the draft scoping document, it will sort of lay out where we actually ended up on that recommendation.
Okay. Final thoughts? Anyone? All right. Thank you, guys. I did promise I would ask. There was a comment by email about whether we should always allow public comment during work sessions. My response is it needs to be a case by case type situation, because I promised I'd ask.
I always like public I mean, it just seems like it's usually helpful for us to hear. If, you know, and maybe there's a time limit associated with it, you know, I think that's probably the question. It's like, okay, we always have up to 15 minutes or up to whatever, is that would be the issue, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it is, because these are usually constrained. The purpose is for us to get feedback and not, we don't vote on anything.
Right, true.
No problem.
Okay.
I love that.
We'll come back to that.